yourself.
Do you want to know how I think it's going? Not very well. At least tried to act like police officers.
So how was your day?
Well, you know. The usual.
Blue Lights starts next Monday at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
Project Icon, where 10 rising artists take on the realities of the modern-day music industry. They'll need to sell themselves on socials and have media smarts.
They'll also need killer songwriting skills and stage presence.
And it's important that they build their brand.
A voice is not enough. Project Icon starts Sunday at 9 on BBC Three and iPlayer.
Without question, times are tough and many people are struggling. Now on BBC One, Ros Atkins makes sense of it all.
People are struggling, costs are going through the roof, and I'm not sure there's any way of stopping it.
There's lots of people currently working just to pay the bills, not having any sort of life.
We struggle just so we can have a roof over our head.
Millions of Britons have effectively had a pay cut. Wages aren't keeping up with costs. Public services are struggling too.
It's tough right now, and I can't be the only one who's asking, what's going on?
The government offers this explanation.
It's the legacy of COVID, and it's, of course, what Putin is doing.
But are Ukraine and COVID the full story?
I think the UK is probably poorer than most people think.
The system isn't producing like it should. That is the result of choices we've made.
This is definitely not what normal looks like. This is what failure looks like.
The government rejects talk of failure or decline, and it's true, Britain's one of the richest countries in the world. But if that's the case, why do so many people feel so poor?
Cornwall is home to more than 500,000 people. It's where I grew up and where my parents still live.
These days, Cornwall relies on fishing, farming, and most of all, tourism. It's one of the most popular destinations in the country, but it's also one of the poorest parts of the UK.
Cornish workers are among the UK's lowest paid. With rising food, housing, and energy prices, life has got harder in the last few years for many people. Andy Collins is one of them.
So where are we off to?
We're off to Luxillian, which is a small village just outside of Par, to follow up on a patient that we saw last week.
Andy used to be a healthcare assistant. Then, after 4 years of training, he became a nurse.
And you enjoy it?
Love it. Wouldn't trade it for the world. I absolutely adore my job.
He qualified a year ago.
Right, got me mask, got me gloves, got me apron. Happy days. How you doing?
How about you?
It's me.
Hello.
Were you expecting somebody else?
Andy works full-time and earns just short of £24,000 a year.
How do you feel now you're back on the bed?
I'm fine.
You fine?
OK.
All done?
I can hear in how you talk about your job, the passion that you have for it, the commitment you have to the job, to the patients, to all of it, really. But does the level of pay you receive for it have an impact on how you feel about this?
It does. It's starting to get close to being that I can't afford to do this. It's becoming a problem in that does the level of pay that we receive match our outgoings?
But are the concerns so pronounced that you would consider quitting?
It's getting close.
Right now, inflation is close to a 40-year high. And even with his promotion, for Andy, the sums just don't add up.
As soon as I qualified was October, and up went the rate of gas, up went the electric, up went fuel, so whatever I've earned in extra has just disappeared into bills. I'm seeing colleagues that are struggling. I'm seeing gaps in the workforce that mean we are really, really busy and we can't always spend as much time as we want with patients.
Nurses' pay has failed to keep up with the cost of living. When you factor in inflation, they're now 10% worse off than they were in 2010.
People are still being forced to, rely on food banks and things and then come to work to look after people. That's a situation that is just completely untenable.
Nurses are now considering a new pay offer from the government. But across the country, many public and private sector workers are taking action.
What do we want? When do we want it?
The government doesn't deny it's difficult right now, but says big wage rises risk fueling inflation further.
What do we want? Decent pay. When do we want it? Now!
Arguments over pay are happening now, but the experience of so many workers is part of a story that reaches back years. Here's how.
The UK is in one of the longest periods of slow wage growth in living memory.
This graph shows the average wage in the UK. It's more than doubled since 2000. But look what happens when this is adjusted to factor in rising prices, to show how much a wage can actually buy. In the 15 years since the financial crash of 2008, it's hardly grown at all.
Panorama asked the think tank the Resolution Foundation to look at the data on wages.
It estimated that if wage growth had continued as it was doing before 2008, workers would have, on average, around £11,000 more a year than they do today. But that's not what's happened.
The wage stagnation of the last 15 years is almost completely unprecedented. Nobody who's alive and working in the British economy today has ever seen anything like this. Nobody thought it could happen, and I think there is a danger that we treat that as normal. We've got used to it over the last 15 years, and we've forgotten this is definitely not what normal looks like. This is what failure looks like.
And this is being felt.
In 2008, the typical German household earned over £500 a year more than the average UK household. By 2020, the gap was over £4,000, an 8-fold increase. Or, as the Institute for Fiscal Studies puts it, the slowdown in wage growth in the UK spells the end of the long growth in living standards, something that had lasted decades.
The idea that each generation does at least as well as the one before has, for the moment, ended.
So how do we explain why wages, in real terms, have stopped growing? Many economists say it's the UK's low level of productivity. In other words, the work we do needs to produce more.
There's a quote about this from the Nobel Prize-winning economist Paul Krugman, who says, productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. The argument being that if you want to increase people's living standards in the long run, well, by far the best way of doing that is to increase the output of each worker.
So productivity is how much you produce with a unit of labor or with a machine. The more you can produce, the more you get rewarded for it.
Most of us, if we think about productivity, would probably think about how well we work as individuals, how efficient we are, how much we produce or achieve. Here in Harlem Bay, I want to talk to this group of local business people once they get out of the sea.
I mean, I'm pretty keen on going in the water in Cornwall when I come back home, but this is next level. I'm not sure I'd be doing this in February.
But these swimmers are braver than me.
We should point out it's absolutely freezing when you're on the beach and you're dry, so goodness knows what they're experiencing out there.
Amazing, very alive. Good, very alive, very tingly, very blue.
It definitely takes the cobwebs out, shall we say, for a morning.
For some of the group, this is part of improving their own productivity.
If you allow yourself time to get outside, go for a walk, go for a swim, I think perhaps you get your brain going in a different way and you can then be more productive in a shorter space of time.
Would you be surprised if I said the UK had a productivity issue?
To be honest, not really, because I think we've been barking up some of the wrong trees, I think.
Do you think maybe the British are we're kind of going at it the whole time, but maybe not always so efficiently?
Perhaps. Maybe we've been too long slaves to our desks, feeling like you're working hard but not necessarily working smart.
Personal productivity is one thing. You can also measure the productivity of a company, or indeed, of a country. And the UK's productivity is lagging behind. Here's how.
Productivity has long been a concern for the UK's economy.
UK productivity has grown 0.4% per year since 2008. To put that in context, the average across other developed countries is 0.9%. For example, in Germany, the value of a worker's output is more than £47 per hour. In France, it's more than £51. But in the UK, it's around £43.50.
And all of this affects how much people get paid.
So it is true that we as a nation cannot afford wage increases that are higher than inflation unless we have a productivity miracle. And we're not on the verge of a productivity miracle, unfortunately.
And increasing productivity is particularly hard because of the nature of the UK's economy.
Our manufacturing industry has been shrinking for decades. These days, nearly 80% of the economy comes from services, like financial services, hospitality, and retail.
Services are lower productivity than manufacturing, so that again has slowly been putting downward pressure on productivity, and that again feeds through to real wages.
All of which means until the UK solves its productivity puzzle, its low wage growth will be hard to resolve.
One way to try to boost productivity is to increase investment. This is Colestic Farm. It's been making ice cream since the 1980s.
Did you buy this farm to make ice cream, or does it go further back?
No, it goes a lot further back than that. My grandmother bought this farm in 1935.
Much more recently, they signed a big new contract with M&S. Father and son, Sebastian and Ben Parker, needed to triple the farm's output, and that cost money.
Investment is obviously key to be able to produce the volume that we're doing. You know, if you don't have the infrastructure and the equipment in place to be able to do that, you know, you can't do it. It's as simple as that, really.
Colestic spent more than £1 million, including on this spiral freezer. Now they can produce 3 times the amount of ice cream, with only a small increase in staffing. The result is a big rise in their productivity.
It very much represents a step change in the way that we've done things. With smaller equipment, with a lower output, clearly, you know, you can't produce the output you need to do to be able to fulfil a larger contract.
Greater efficiency means they may in time be able to pay their staff more.
We've been through a round of massive investment into the business in terms of equipment and infrastructure. And in the longer term, that will mean that the business can sustain, you know, higher rates of pay for all.
The extra dimension here is the UK's very low levels of unemployment. Businesses are competing for staff, so the ability to pay more helps. Colestic's experience shows how business investment can increase productivity, and that can help deliver higher pay. But across the UK, it's not happening enough.
Low investment is a challenge for the UK's economy now, but this isn't new.
Britain's big problem is just very low levels of investment. Low levels of investment by our firms, low levels of investment not only in kit, like it's actually hard to get something built in Britain if you're a company, but low levels of investment in their staff.
Between 1997 and 2017, investment from both private companies and the government was equivalent to 16% of the UK's GDP. That's 16% of the total value of the economy. But look at how that compares with other developed countries. We're last on this list, behind Canada, France, the US, Germany, and many others. The UK's level of investment has been low since the 90s, but in the years after the financial crash of 2008, the coalition government put the brakes on spending, and investment went even lower. Professor Diane Coyle at Cambridge University told us a lack of investment over decades has held back the economy and made the UK less resilient than comparable countries to shocks like Brexit, COVID, and the invasion of Ukraine. This is Engineered Arts in Falmouth, and this is a humanoid robot called Amica.
Studies suggest that the country is lagging behind other advanced economies in terms of output per hour work.
Amica interacts with humans using artificial intelligence to sift information from the internet. She's sold to businesses and universities around the world.
The government is introducing several initiatives to try and increase productivity rates, but more needs to be done.
The company's received £4.5 million from investors in North America, none from within the UK.
Do you think the UK takes engineering and mechanisation as seriously as other countries do?
No. The UK operates with a kind of banking mindset. You know, the cost of everything, the value of nothing. I think there's lip service paid to this idea that we're investing in technology for our future prosperity. But the reality is that on the ground, it just doesn't happen.
Will's creation, though, is more positive.
Amica, could you tell me about business investment in the UK?
The UK government is taking an active role in encouraging investments and providing incentives for businesses to grow and develop.
The man she shares an office with begs to differ. He says more government investment is needed in education, technology, and infrastructure.
It's very hard for us to recruit people with the necessary engineering skills from UK institutions. If you want business, you have to provide space for business, and I think there's a definite lack, and there's also a lack of planning for space. I think there has not been that much support in terms of capital investment from the government.
And Will Jackson's experience fits with the national picture.
The UK invests less in things like skills and innovation and infrastructure than other countries. This is especially the case since 2010, but actually it's also a longer-term problem that we've seen over the years.
The government doesn't deny there's a problem here. Since 2020, it's increased its own spending on investments. And last year, Rishi Sunak asked this.
Why is investment in capital so low? My analysis is clear. The problem is no longer the government. Businesses simply aren't investing enough.
But why might that be? Because businesses don't take investment decisions in a vacuum, and one factor in their decision-making is political turbulence.
Most economists would tell you what is the #1 thing you can do to make sure, and to incentivise business investment, private sector investment, and therefore drive growth, is to have stability and certainty and strong institutions. And we seem to have gone out of our way over the last few years anyway to undermine some of those things.
Since 2016, there have been 5 prime ministers.
Thank you, goodbye, thank you.
As well as COVID and the war in Ukraine, there was also the financial turmoil of Liz Truss's leadership. And years of uncertainty over Brexit. All of this has come at a price.
For example, the government's official watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, projects that Brexit will shrink the UK economy by 4%.
It also says that business investment has stagnated since 2016. The government would say Brexit is a long-term plan. Rishi Sunak has talked of building an economy that embraces the opportunities of Brexit.
And while there are debates about investment strategy for the future, it's beyond dispute that the UK's investment is low compared to other developed countries. It's been low for years, and this, in the short term, is being exacerbated by Brexit. And none of that helps increase productivity or wages.
Across the UK, families are feeling the squeeze. Polling shared exclusively with Panorama suggested 1 in 4 people are finding it difficult on their current income, and nearly half are worried about their financial situation. Nikki Rogers works around 20 hours a week as a carer and gets £10.50 an hour. She also receives universal credit, has various loans, and borrows from friends. But it's not enough. She lives with her daughter Leah and son Archie.
It's really sad that, you know, that we struggle just so we can have a roof over our head.
With the light bulb gone, they say they can't even afford to buy a new one until the next payday.
I pay for my own petrol to get to work, and Leah pays for her own petrol to get to work. So that's over £100 a week, and I don't get no extras, no mileage or anything, which is a pig.
So I get paid weekly with work, so that's what holds us over for the week. I got paid on Friday, and it was gone Saturday morning. Nicest way possible. If I moved out, Mum wouldn't be able to survive, even worse than she already does. Because it's my money that we live off. Archie goes to school to be fed, basically. He doesn't care about school like he should. It's the norm now.
I think it's reasonable for all of us to have a better standard of living, because at the moment we're just muddling through. This isn't normal, is it?
This isn't normal. And in a cost of living crisis, it's the lowest paid who are hit the hardest.
The current shock is particularly bad in that it's driven by inflation in energy prices and also food prices. These are things that low-income households spend more of their income on, so the inflation that they face is actually higher than the inflation rates faced by higher-income households.
This is made worse by inequality. The UK's highest earners are among the richest in Europe, but our lowest income families are more than 20% poorer than those in France and Germany. That's nearly £4,000 a year lower than their French equivalents. Just before Christmas, Nikki turned to a food bank for the first time.
My wages weren't covering anything that I needed. I can't remember my mum saying we've got to sit in the dark for the night. Oh, you can't have that because I can't afford it this week. You know, that we couldn't put our eating on because we haven't only got £1 left in our meter. My mum never said none of that to me. And I find like I'm saying that to my children, and that's shocking. Everything seems to be falling apart.
None of this is going to let up soon. The polling shared with Panorama suggests 44% of people think their standard of living is going to get worse in the next year. And the data suggests they're right. The government's independent watchdog says in the next 2 years we'll see the largest 2-year fall in living standards since their records began in the 50s.
Let's go. Come on, Keely Pervin, let's go.
In Penzance, this group of dancers is meeting for their latest class. Senan is 17 and doing A-levels.
Definitely feel a sense of unfairness.
Well done. Swinging the back leg round to the front.
It has angered me a lot and it has made me quite upset.
These concerns are shared by Abigail, who's also 17 and a photography student.
I feel like things that were more achievable back in the day for the past generation aren't going to be as achievable for my generation. If I was to have a family in the future, it would be quite difficult and a lot of stress maybe put on me. I've had all these dreams since I was younger and all these expectations, and now it's all kind of just crashed down.
The government says there are still many reasons to be hopeful. And when our leaders have addressed the pressures of recent years, they've focused on recent events.
the legacy of COVID.
Caused by the lingering effects of COVID.
There is a global energy crisis.
Global pressures on prices.
A global inflation crisis and a global economic crisis.
It's, of course, what Putin is doing.
There's no denying these global factors, but some of our problems are specific to the UK.
We're now like thousands of pounds. The typical Brit is thousands of pounds poorer than the typical German, the typical French person, the typical Australian, the typical Canadian. I mean, the typical American is now 60% richer than the typical Brit. It's not 6, it's 60.
This isn't an easy message to hear, and we're not hearing it from the politicians.
I think there is a lack of diagnosis or understanding of actually what the real structural issues facing the economy are. I think that's particularly true at a political level.
If politicians do understand the problem, they're not keen to say it out loud. I wanted to ask the government about this, but no minister was willing to speak to us. In a statement, the government said, since 2010, the UK economy has grown faster than France, Japan and Italy, and has proven more resilient than many predicted. And in last week's budget, the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt announced measures to try to boost productivity, including investment zones and tax incentives.
Today, we build for the future, with inflation down, debt falling and growth up. The declinists are wrong and the optimists are right. We stick to the plan because the plan is working, and I commend this statement to the House.
The current state of the UK economy is not everyone's definition of a plan that's working. And some economists argue Mr. Hunt's budget doesn't address the scale of the challenge.
What was missing, though, was a clear long-term plan to boost business investment, which will boost productivity in this country. And instead, what we saw was more tinkering around the edges, more temporary policies that might have, some short-term effect on growth, but we're still set to see the biggest drop in living standard for 2 consecutive years. So despite the budget and the perhaps more optimistic outlook, people are still going to feel much poorer than they were before.
That isn't to say this is a lost cause. All the economists Panorama spoke to agree it should be possible to get living standards rising again.
There's every reason to be optimistic. We have the best universities in the world. We have many pockets of excellence. We have a legitimate democratic system in place. It's as if you are a football team and you have all the players, but somehow those players haven't coalesced together.
Forwards and backwards is normal match day warm-up. Yeah. Okay, that is brilliant.
Helston women's football team are training for their next match at the weekend.
Nice little light steps, just loosening up the upper body as well.
But there are other things on their mind too.
What are the difficulties that you didn't quite anticipate?
Being Cornwall, we've got some of the most expensive houses down here. Most of us are going to have to go through either like shared ownership or a different kind of route just to get on the housing ladder.
The money side of things and things like that, There's lots of people currently working just to pay the bills, not having any sort of life.
Many moons ago, I went to primary school here in Helston, and a few years later, when I was around the same age as some of the players here, I guess there was an assumption about life in the UK that the next generation would be a little better off than the one before, that the state would do what it could to look after you if you were poorly, and to put it more broadly, that things get better. But right now, those assumptions are being eroded by the state of the UK economy.
What we're seeing is, in effect, a national pay cut that's been years in the making. It's changing what people can expect from their jobs, from public services, and from their country.
It might not be comfortable to admit it, but by several measures, we're poorer than we think.
Anton and Gio have swapped the ballroom for sunny Sicily.
I want to see where you grew up. I want to see where you learned to dance.
But you know what they say. What goes on in Sicily...
She's madly in love with you.
...doesn't strictly stay in Sicily.
Of course I'll have a family one day.
You'd be a wonderful father.
This is just the beginning.
Anton and Giovanni's Adventures in Sicily starts tomorrow at 9 on BBC One and iPlayer.
New series, new crimes, same cleaner.
What the hell happened?
Someone chopped his head off.
Get out!
Can you clean it or not?
All right, Midsummer Murders, keep your clogs on. Push me up.
So many characters around here.
You poke me again. You won't need that red nose.
Adorable.
What? Fun's over. Clean up time.
The Cleaner starts Friday at 9:30 on BBC One and iPlayer.
We've seen the drama. Tonight, watch the true story of the gold. That's in half an hour. First, after 13 years of lessons, Amy hasn't learned how to drive a car, but tonight she's hoping to smash it. You know what I mean.
Stop! I need a stop! We can't stop here!
Thousands of Brits are currently learning to drive. And I'm one of them. Every week, around half of all UK tests end in failure.
More wheel gaps.
We're not going to mention the fact that I've failed my driving test 13 times.
Oops.
To get on the road, many of us are asking our friends and family to strap themselves in.
Oh, I can't. I don't know how to do this.
Breath, stay calm. But they're not professional instructors.
I can't do it.
Mac, over here.
And it's not always a smooth ride.
You're not going to freak out. That's what we're not going to do.
So I've set up a unique driving school. Welcome. Where we're not just helping the learners, but also those supporting them in the car, their long-suffering loved ones.
I've knackered up having her again.
Over 5 days, our pro instructors will watch all the action.
Oh my God!
And help by feeding crucial tips to the loved ones via an earpiece.
Don't be a sat-nav.
I will keep quiet.
It's all happening here, on my doorstep, in and around Teesside. Can we bring the stress levels down?
I saw that.
And get our learners test ready.
Jess, I'm really proud of you.
Welcome to Scarlett's Driving School.
I'm freaking out. Like, I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do.
Desperate for me driving school's help today is Amy and her exasperated mum, Heather.
I've been learning to drive for about 13 years.
Right, carry on at a slow speed. You've never done this before.
I've taken 2 tests, and the first one, I nearly caused an accident, and that's why I failed.
Oh my God, I don't like it. I don't like it. You're doing great. It was my idea to teach Amy to drive as an extra lesson. We've had some scary moments. Whoops.
What is it with people doing that to me?
I'm sometimes nervous in the car with Amy.
I just need to breathe.
Like, come on, what's the matter with you? And I'm hanging on the door handle sometimes.
You're terrible at roundabouts. And she's like, you need to be in that lane. And I'm like, no, I don't. I need to be in this lane. And she's like, yeah, Amy knows best.
So you want to be in the next lane?
This lane.
Yes.
It's... Right.
It's been quite the bumpy journey so far, but as a single parent of 2 boys, Amy has extra motivation to keep trying.
Passing my test means the absolute world to me. Like, it's everything, and I know on that day that I pass my test, it's going to be a massive sense of achievement. I'm so excited to just like pull up outside of school and be like, right kids, get in. We're going here, or we're going to the beach, or we're going to the country park, or wherever.
Deep in Middlesbrough Town Hall is our state-of-the-art viewing room, where professional instructors Francis and Vicky can see and hear every driving disaster live.
Where's that?
Just keep driving, you're all right.
I could hear him, but I couldn't see him.
She looks really nervous.
Which one?
Both.
Just dip the clutch if you feel as if it's running away and lower your gear.
That's not good advice.
Oh, it's not?
Then you'll be coasting and speeding up.
I'm going right, but I can't cut the corner. No, I'm not you know.
They seem to have a really strong relationship, and that's really important when you're teaching them to drive.
I think I've done okay.
Yeah, much better.
We know what I absolutely love? Every time Amy does something right, Heather will say, that was brilliant, that was good.
Do you think she'll be like that all the time, though, even if she does something wrong? Do you think she'll still be like, yay, it's okay?
That's a good point, because when you do something wrong, you need to know about it.
200 yards, turn right, then turn left. Francis, you've got this lovely pair.
I'm happy with that. I can definitely help Heather be a great instructor.
My heart's racing. Like, I genuinely thought I was going to crash.
It's time for me to open up my learner's lounge, where I'll be by this pair's side all week. Come on in, don't be shy.
Hiya.
Welcome to the learner's lounge.
Thank you.
How long has your mum been teaching you how to drive?
About,
I don't know.
2.5.
Yes,
Yeah?
yes, 2.5 years.
Oh, years?
Yeah.
OK. Is there ever any friction in the car, or...?
Yeah.
Straight to the point. Yeah, there is,
Yeah. Winch just grabbing a hold of the handle, that straight
door
away.
handle?
Yeah,
Just the door
because
handle?
then I
Oh.
think, what are you doing that for?
Oh,
What am
yeah.
I doing
What are
wrong?
you
Like,
doing
oh my
wrong?
God, am I going to crash?
Yeah.
Like, you can just see how much yous love each other, especially the amount of praise. Like, like you would literally just, like, pull up at the traffic lights and you'd be like, very well done.
Because I need that, like,
Yes,
don't I?
yeah.
I always needed, like recently, a lot of reassurance in my life because I don't believe in myself.
I was in a relationship that was quite traumatic. It had knocked my confidence, knocked my self-esteem, and that's when I failed my test.
It wasn't the best of relationships, and we could see it, but we had to wait until Amy could see it. And I knew one day she would wake up and think, this isn't the life that I want.
Heather, what seems to be the issue with Amy's driving?
Just our nerves and approaching roundabouts, traffic lights. It seems to, you get really tense, don't you?
I do.
And that's
if
when...
she picks up on that straight away, even though I feel like I'm not showing it.
Yeah.
But, you know, she just knows.
So, back then, I was just a shell of a person, and I really owe my life to my mum because she picked us up. She picked me up from the bottom and she was like, we can do it. And she held my hand all the way. I wouldn't be living the life that I am now if it wasn't for my mum.
Well, I think you're going to be fab, so enjoy your first lesson and I'll see you later.
See you later.
Bye. Oh, I love them. They make my heart melt. It's time for Amy's first lesson, as she hopes to finally overcome her driving demons after 3 failed tests.
Mirror, single, manoeuvre.
Expert instructor Francis will be giving Mam Heather instructions and tips via an earpiece.
I've been teaching for 7 years, but I've never had to teach someone when I'm not even sitting in the car. It's really difficult to teach family how to drive. I once tried to teach my mum. It didn't end well.
So first, the good news. Our pro instructor Francis will be making the roads of Britain a safer place by sorting out our learners' dodgy driving. The bad news? Well, the people of Yarm have to keep out of the way while they do it.
Amy's a more than capable driver. I can see that she can drive, but Heather seems uncomfortable. I really need to dig into that. Hey, Heather, it's Francis. I'm going to be your instructor. How are you feeling today?
A little bit, trying to be relaxed.
We're coming up to a roundabout, and I'm going to let you help Amy with this, and let's see how we get on.
Go left on the roundabout and take the second
I'm in the
exit.
wrong lane. I am in the wrong lane, aren't I?
What we'll do is just indicate.
If I don't have, clear direction of where I'm going, I start to panic. It's just a spiral.
I'm only so we'll let you over.
Oh my God, I don't like it, I don't like it.
Amy has managed to get off the roundabout at the correct exit, but the lane confusion has left her panicked.
That's it. I
No,
think
I
it's not
can't do
loose.
it.
You can, right? Just calm down. We've done it.
I don't even know what gear I'm in. I think I'm in the wrong gear. I'm
just
losing power.
Go on a second. Go on. Right. Yeah, right. You can do it. You can do it.
Carry on at a slow speed, come off at the next junction.
Just carry on here.
Let Amy know that it's not far.
It's not far. It's not far.
I am quite anxious, and driving brings on a lot of anxiety. More so when I'm coming up to a roundabout and I've got to really think about what I'm doing. That's when my anxiety gets worse. And it's about how I manage that. So I use breathing techniques. And it takes a lot of concentration and it takes a lot of strength. I didn't know what lane to be in, and I felt like I couldn't get the gear, and then I was like, I started to panic. And I'm
right, yeah, okay, we're fine. Just calm down.
With things getting frantic, Frances decides to step in to help Heather help Amy.
You just let Amy know what's happening next. We're following this down to the next roundabout.
We're following this road down to the next roundabout.
Out in the next roundabout.
Yes, out in the next roundabout.
Left lane, straight on, third exit.
Left lane, yes.
Straight
yes, third
on.
exit, so you stop.
Let her know it's straight ahead so she knows what side of the